FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was eating dinner with his mother when the phone rang at 8:47 p.m. on October 12, 1964. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, and absolutely terrifying. "Mr. Hoover," Bumpy Johnson said, "I have your nephew Tommy. He's safe for now. But that could change depending on what you decide to do in the next 72 hours. Hoover's fork clattered to his plate as his blood ran cold. Tommy was only 11 years old, his brother's boy, the closest thing Hoover had to a son of his own. "What do you want?" Hoover whispered. "I want you to choose, Mr. Hoover, your nephew's life or your carré. You can't have both." What followed was the most twisted game of psychological chess ever played between a gangster and the head of America's most powerful law enforcement agency, a game where an innocent child was the ultimate prize. The kidnapping had been planned for 3 months, but the reason for it went back 3 years to a conversation that should never have happened. September 1961, Hoover was meeting with Attorney General Robert Kennedy in the Justice Department when Kennedy made a proposal that would haunt both men for years. "Edgar, we need to destroy the black leadership in this country. King, Malcolm X, and especially that Bumpy Johnson character in Harlem. They're becoming too powerful, too organized. They're a threat to national security." Signing. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. were inspiring millions of black Americans to demand equal treatment. But it wasn't the peaceful protesters who worried Hoover. Most it was men like Bumpy Johnson, who had the respect of the streets and the intelligence to organize real resistance. "What do you have in mind?" Hoover asked. "COINTELPRO," Kennedy said. "Counter-intelligence program. We infiltrate their organizations, disrupt their activities, discredit their leaders. We turn them against each other. We destroy them from the inside. And if that doesn't work," Kennedy's expression went cold, "then we use more direct methods." Over the next 2 years, COINTELPRO became the FBI's secret war against black America. Agents infiltrated civil rights organizations, planted false evidence, spread rumors designed to create conflicts between leaders, and used every dirty trick in the government's playbook to sabotage the movement. But Bumpy Johnson was different. He wasn't a civil rights leader who held public rallies or gave speeches that could be recorded and twisted. He was a criminal who operated in shadows, who understood surveillance and counter-surveillance, who had been fighting dirty for 30 years. Every FBI agent sent to infiltrate Bumpy's organization was identified within weeks. Every attempt to plant evidence was discovered and turned against the agents who planted it. Every informant was fed false information that made the FBI look foolish. By 1964, Hoover was frustrated and desperate. COINTELPRO had successfully damaged other black leaders, but Bumpy Johnson remained untouchable. Worse, Bumpy seemed to be enjoying the game, leaving subtle clues that let Hoover know he was aware of every FBI operation against him. That's when Hoover made his fake autorised direct methods against Bumpy. August 15th, 1964. Dr. Sarah Williams was walking to her car after finishing her shift at Harlem Hospital when 2 men in suits approached her. Dr. Williams was a pediatrician who treated children in Bumpy's neighborhood. including several children of Bumpy's associates. She was also completely innocent of any criminal activity. Dr. Williams, one of the agents, said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics." The charges were fabricated, but they were detailed enough to seem credible. The FBI claimed that Dr. Williams had been prescribing medications that were being sold on the street as illegal drugs. They had falsified pharmacy records, planted evidence in her home, and recruited a drug dealer to testify against her in exchange for reduced charges. Dr. Williams was arrested in front of dozens of witnesses, handcuffed, and taken to federal detention. The message was clear: if the FBI couldn't get to Bumpy directly, they would destroy the innocent people around him until he surrendered. But Hoover had underestimated something crucial about Bumpy Johnson. He genuinely cared about his community. Dr. Williams wasn't just a random target. She was a woman who had saved the lives of countless children in Harlem. Her arrest wasn't just an attack on Bumpy. It was an attack on everything he'd spent his life protecting. That night, Bumpy made a decision that would change both their lives forever. If Hoover wanted to play dirty, Bumpy would show him what dirty really looked like. The research took 6 weeks. Bumpy's people infiltrated the FBI building, followed agents to their homes, documented their personal lives, and identified their weaknesses. What they discovered was that J. Edgar Hoover, the most feared man in law enforcement, had one vulnerability that could destroy him: his nephew Tommy. Tommy Hoover was 11 years old, the son of Hoover's deceased brother. After his parents died in a car accident, Tommy had been living with his uncle, and Hoover had become completely devoted to the boy. It was the only genuine human relationship in Hoover's cold, calculated life. More importantly, Tommy was completely unguarded. While Hoover lived in a fortress of security, Tommy walked to school every morning like any normal child. He played in the park, rode his bicycle around the neighborhood, and trusted the world in the way that only children can. October 12, 1964, 3:30 p.m., Tommy Hoover was walking home from St. Joseph's Preparatory School when a black sedan pulled up beside him. The man who got out was well-dressed, polite, and completely non-threatening. "Tommy, I'm Mr. Jackson. Your uncle sent me to pick you up today. He's running late at work and wanted to make sure you got home safely." Tommy hesitated. His uncle had never sent anyone to pick him up before. But the man knew his name, knew about his uncle, and seemed genuinely concerned about his safety. "Is Uncle Edgar okay?" "Tommy son juste very busy. He asked me to take you to get ice cream while we wait for him to finish his meetings." Tommy got in the car. By 5 p.m., when Tommy didn't arrive home from school, Hoover was worried. By 6 p.m., he was making phone calls to the school and to neighbors. By 7 p.m., he was mobilizing FBI resources to find his missing nephew. By 8:47 p.m., when Bumpy Johnson called, Hoover understood that he was no longer the hunter. He had become the prey. "Where is he?" Hoover demanded. "He's safe, Mr. Hoover. He's playing with some other children, eating good food, being treated with kindness and respect. Much better treatment than you gave Dr. Sarah Williams." Dr. Williams, the pediatrician you arrested on false charges. The woman who spent her life saving children, including the child you're about to lose if you don't make the right decision. Hoover's mind raced. How did Bumpy know about the Williams operation? How long had he been planning this? How had he gotten close enough to Tommy to take him without anyone noticing? What do you want? I want Dr. Williams released immediately, with all charges dropped and her record expunged. I want you to end COINTELPRO operations against black communities. And I want you to resign from the FBI within 72 hours. That's impossible. Even if I wanted to, nothing's impossible, Mr. Hoover. You've spent years destroying innocent people to advance your career. Now, you have to choose: continue destroying lives, or save the one life that actually matters to you. How do I know Tommy is really safe? How do I know you won't hurt him, regardless of what I do? There was a pause. Then Tommy's voice came on the line. Uncle Edgar, I'm okay. These people are really nice to me. They have lots of kids here, and we're playing games and eating pizza. When are you coming to get me? Soon, Tommy, Hoover said, his voice cracking. Very soon. Bumpy's voice returned. You have 72 hours. Mr. Hoover, drop the charges against Dr. Williams, end the harassment of my community, and resign. Or explain to Tommy why his uncle values his job more than his nephew's life over the next 3 days. Hoover experienced something he'd never felt before: helplessness. He was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, one of the most powerful men in America, and he couldn't find one 11-year-old boy in his own city. Hoover mobilized hundreds of agents to search for Tommy. They raided suspected hideouts, interrogated known associates of Bumpy Johnson, and turned Harlem upside down looking for any clue. But Bumpy had learned from the best, from Hoover himself, how to make people disappear without a trace. Meanwhile, Tommy was having the time of his life. Bumpy had arranged for Tommy to stay with a foster family in Queens, a family with 3 children of their own who welcomed Tommy like a brother. Tommy thought he was on an adventure, staying with friends while his uncle was busy with work. He had no idea he'd been kidnapped. On the second day, Hoover received a package: photographs of Tommy playing with other children, eating dinner with a family, sleeping peacefully in a comfortable bed. Tommy looked happy, healthy, and completely unharmed. But the message was clear: Bumpy could reach him anytime, anywhere. On the third day, Hoover made his choice. October 15th, 1964, Dr. Sarah Williams was released from federal detention with all charges dropped. The FBI issued a statement saying that new evidence had come to light that exonerated her completely. Her arrest record was expunged, and she was quietly compensated for her legal expenses and lost wages. That someday, J. Edgar Hoover submitted a letter to Attorney General Robert Kennedy requesting a leave of absence for personal reasons. The letter mentioned his need to spend more time with family and his desire to step back from the daily pressures of law enforcement. At 6 p.m. on October 15th, Tommy Hoover was dropped off at the FBI building in Washington, D.C. He walked into his uncle's office with a huge smile, carrying a bag of toys and souvenirs from his adventure. Uncle Edgar, I had the most amazing time. The Jackson family is so nice, and they have the coolest games. And we went to the zoo and the museum, and Tommy stopped talking when he saw his Uncle's face. Uncle Edgar, why are you crying? Hoover hugged his nephew tighter than he'd ever hugged anyone in his life. "I missed you, Tommy. I missed you so much, but I was only gone for 3 days. And Mr. Johnson said you knew where I was the whole time, Mr. Johnson. Yeah, he came to visit me yesterday. He's really nice. He told me you two were old friends and that you'd worked together to make sure I was safe while you were busy with work. He said to tell you that friends always keep their promises to each other that night." Alone in his office, Hoover understood the full scope of what Bumpy Johnson had done. It wasn't just a kidnapping, it was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Bumpy had taken Tommy without the boy ever feeling threatened or afraid. He'd kept him safe, entertained, and happy while demonstrating to Hoover that he could have done anything he wanted to the most important person in Hoover's life. But more than that, Bumpy had given Hoover a gift, the knowledge of what it felt like to be helpless. To have someone you love threatened by forces beyond your control. To face the choice between career and family that Bumpy's community faced every day. Hoover's leave of absence lasted 6 months. When he returned to the FBI, COINTELPRO operations against black communities had been quietly scaled back. The program continued to exist, but it focused on genuinely violent organizations rather than civil rights leaders and community protectors. Tommy Hoover grew up believing he'd been on a wonderful adventure with family friends. He never learned that he'd been kidnapped, never knew that his uncle had been forced to choose between his career and his nephew's life. He remembered Bumpy Johnson as a kind man who had told him stories and given him advice about standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Dr. Sarah Williams returned to her practice at Harlem Hospital and continued saving children's lives for another 20 years. She never learned why her charges had been dropped so suddenly, but she suspected it had something to do with the fact that Bumpy Johnson visited her office a week after her release to personally apologize for what she'd been through. Bumpy Johnson never spoke publicly about the 3 days when he held the most powerful law enforcement officer in America hostage to the safety of one 11-year-old boy. But people in Harlem noticed that after October 1964, FBI harassment of the community decreased significantly. The kidnapping of Tommy Hoover proved something that Hoover himself had never fully understood. That real power isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to know when destruction is unnecessary. Sometimes the most effective way to defeat someone isn't to hurt them, it is to show them what it feels like to be vulnerable, to be afraid, to face impossible choices between duty and love. And sometimes the most powerful message you can send is to return what you've taken, unharmed and unaware, with the quiet promise that next time you might not be so merciful.